Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at the Arris X110 HD, featuring 1106 4000 kV motors, the Caddx Turtle HD FPV camera, F4 flight controller with an OSD, Emax Rush 2.5-inch props, 20 amp 4-in-1 ESC, SpeedyB TX500 ESC from 25 milliwatts on up to 500 milliwatt, XT30 for your battery connection. I added the strain relief. It also has a capacitor, but I can't read what it is. We have a buzzer, comes with Velcro for your battery. I used a gummy pad, an extra battery strap, a Caddx control board to change the settings on the camera, an extra wiring harness, 90-degree USB adapter, an extra set of props, manual for your VTX, and a flight stack instruction manual, and a USB cable. It weighs almost 123.5 grams. In the first flight is a 4S flight, and I flew it on this GNB 4S 550 milliamp battery, which brings the all-up weight to just over 195 grams. I also flew it on this 3S GNB 550 milliamp battery, which brings the all-up weight just over 179 grams. Motor post to motor post, I'm getting almost 112 millimeters. The flight that we're about to watch is 4S, and it is with the hoop still on. It is untuned. This is how it comes. It just comes with the Betaflight default PIDs, so it hasn't been tuned, and it flies reasonably well. That's why I didn't retune it on 4S, but it isn't necessarily going to feel locked in. You know, that's a term that we like to throw around as FPV pilots. So this one, if you were to get one, it's going to feel a bit loose, but I also think that because it comes with hoops, this one is geared towards people who might be early on in their FPV journey, and you're looking for those hoops to protect your props a little bit. Also, I should note that the carbon, as I mentioned in the quick roll, is a little bit flexible, but to my surprise, I have a fairly dramatic crash that I'll show you eventually, because we have a lot of flights to get through, and it had no impact on the carbon. So that was a little bit of a surprise for me. I really expected with the crash that we will eventually see that we would have some pretty serious damage, but we did not. I'm thankful for that. The quad's still in good working order. If you want to know, I think I blew out a prop of all things, or I didn't get all the screws tightened down when I was taking the hoops off, because we are going to see some flights without the hoop. While it might be geared for someone getting started, this is a 4S flight. I wouldn't suggest, if you're getting started, that you make the 4S battery investment, because 4S batteries are more expensive. So if you're looking at this or something like this, I would look at doing the 3S first, because it will get you in with lower weight. So that means when you do crash, it will be less likely to have a dramatic breakage, because that inertia and that impact will be just less, because you're carrying less all-up weight. And that's why I did the 3S, and I did retune the 3S a little bit. I tried to tighten it up some. I got it to a point where eventually the footage didn't come out great, and I had to back off. So that's kind of the fine-tuning of these HD quads, is you do want this clear HD footage when you're flying to be able to review and show your family and friends. So if you over-tune it, which I did, then you end up with little imperfections or jello. And I think with the TPU mount, I was a little bit surprised. I was skeptical when I first started flying this, that when I reviewed the HD footage, that it was going to come out as good as it did. I think it's pretty respectable. I think the only parts where I'm seeing imperfections, but you can correct me down in the comment section below, is when we do those throttle punches. Then we start to get a little bit of that micro vibration as it really ramps up the RPMs on the motors and props, and we start to see a little bit of that imperfection. And that could be because of the flexible carbon. It's not rock stiff, so that we could have a little bit of a harmonic or a resonant frequency coming in through the arm, or at least maybe it's dampening the arm, for all I know. I'm not really into black box, so I just like to fly things and then kind of see what I can do with them, how I can improve them from time to time, and also, you know, just how they fly out of the box is also an important feature, one I don't often show on the channel, mainly because of brevity, because I find that if I make longer videos, that most people only watch about 5 minutes. So I try to front load as much as I can, so that the people who do watch get all the information they could possibly want. This is our 4S flight with the same battery that I showed you in the quick roll. This time I've cranked up the camera angle a little bit, and I've also taken off the hoops or the prop guards, however you want to look at them. So we've got decreased weight, and we're going to get a longer flight time. Possibly not only just the weight is a factor there, but the hoops they create wind resistance, so therefore when you try to fly forward, you have to use more energy in order to create that forward momentum, or really any movement, because it is pushing against those hoops. They have that flat edge all the way around them. that even though the circular doesn't help us in performance. But I was pretty happy with how it flew on 4S without the hoops. I thought it was pretty reasonable. Something like this, carrying an HD camera, they always come in a little bit heavier than we do with others. You know, we're kind of in this trend right now where we're going hyper light or micro light. The toothpick, the twig, micros have changed for the most part. But this kind of fits into a niche where you're wanting to get started in FPV, but you really want that HD footage. Like I said in the previous flight, you want that footage so that you have something to watch back that's better than DVR footage, or you want to be able to share it with family and friends, whether that's, you know, reviewing it on a computer or sharing it on YouTube or some other sort of platform. I think that's where this lies in the niche market, where you have the prop guards and HD footage. But as you can see, I can whiz around the yard, and I do think our footage is still pretty clean. I don't think it has any of the jello that we've seen in other micros that have HD cameras in it. So that's a good thing for it. This flight's going to come in about 27 seconds longer than the previous flight, so almost 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Again, on that 4S GNB 550 milliamp battery. And that gives you an idea of how much resistance those whoops do give us when we're flying around. Also, I'm flying a little bit faster, so therefore I should be using more energy to create the forward momentum. And I thought it did quite well. It's pretty rare that you get a micro and a 2.5 inch prop that you fly an HD version and you get over 3 minutes. So that's pretty rare, at least for me in my hands. My flights tend to be pretty short. You see there that I had a little bit of a problem in locking in locking in where you come down at the bottom and you just hit it flat. That's something that I experienced. That's battery sag. That when you start to get on the tail end of the battery and you do a big move where you have to catch a little bit, then if you go back to the previous punch out I did, you'll see where I caught a lot better. The battery sag, so it went below where I expected, and then I had to hit the throttle hard to keep it from crashing into the ground. So that's something that you need to be aware of as well, is that when you're carrying this much weight on a battery, or you're carrying this much weight and it's not high performance because of the weight, that you may find that as you get deeper and deeper into the battery that you'll have to give it more and more throttle. Kind of like back in our brush days when we used to just fly 1S batteries for all they were worth until it had nothing left and we had to land because it couldn't create any more thrust. Following this flight, we'll take a look at 3S. Maybe we should do the crash first. What do you think? Should we do the crash and then we do 3S? I know a few people probably want to get on with the rest of their lives after seeing 2 flights. Yeah, let's go ahead and let's jump into that crash footage then. So this is our crash flight. And I've got the volume really reduced here just so you could get a little sample. I've probably got only about 10% of the volume actually on. Let's go ahead and turn that off. The volume on this, the audio on this isn't very good, but watch this punch out. Yeah, as soon as I hit the throttle, bam, and in the gutter. Thankfully, it's not on the tall part of the house because I have a little problem with heights. And I don't know if I would have had the guts to get it down, but that's on the garage side. So eventually I get over there and I do pick it out of the gutter and we go about flying after replacing the prop. I wanted to show you this little footage here. I found a little friend, so I decided I would just kind of see how he interacted with the quad a little bit. You can see him there on the swing set. He's just we're kind of eyeballing each other like a standoff or something. He crawls up in there. I kind of look around. I can see that he's kind of hiding right there. He is. All right, let's go around the other way. This is just for fun. You know, I like to have fun. This is a hobby. This isn't my job. I like to enjoy the process. And, you know, sometimes animals are fun to interact with. So I can see his head poking out there. Let's fly through there and see what happens. And he's gone. I take a whiz around trying to find him. I missed him. He actually went into that tree just over on the other side of the swing set. And eventually I see him over there and see him kind of peeking out. Now I'm going to circle here a little bit. And we're going to do a little bit of an orbit together. I guess you might call it a dance. He keeps going higher as I bring the quad around. But I can't see him anymore. But that was a little fun thing I wanted to share with you. Let's get into that 3S flight. As I said, this is 3S, GNB 3S battery, 550 milliamp battery. It's the old blockier style of battery. It's not the new line. You can still buy those older style. They weigh a little bit more, but they also don't suffer from battery sag quite as much as the new ones. And so when you have a machine like this, I tend to run these batteries because it tends to hold out a little bit better. And speaking of hold out, the flight time on this one, because we're looking at the HD footage, we don't have the OSD to tell us the flight time, is going to be about 3 minutes and 10 seconds. So surprisingly enough, with essentially a 1 cell less battery, we don't have that much less flight time. Again, that's why when I was talking during the 4S flight, how I talked about if you're entering the hobby that I wouldn't make the 4S battery investment, I would get 3S batteries. It flies reasonably well, and when we get back to the desk, I'll show you the PIDs that I'm using in this flight, and you can use those. You could probably, maybe, use those PIDs on 4S. You might find you need to drop the P value on pitch and roll by about 5 to 7. If you find you have oscillations, do a quick line of sight hover to see how it sounds before you start to fly it. And if you do have some oscillations, then drop those down, as I mentioned before. But I thought it flew reasonably well, and probably something that's more appropriate for somebody who's just starting out in the hobby and is looking for something that has prop guards. But then when you want to venture out and fly a little bit more aggressively, then you can take the prop guards off. One thing about the prop guards, though, they do not give you any screws, and you will need to use different screws than what comes with the kit. So you will have to get shorter screws in order to be able to mount the motors to the quad arms without the prop guards on there. So I had to source those out of my bin. It's very likely that this will end up in a giveaway at some point, because I too tend to give a lot of stuff away just because there's only so much stuff I need. I don't tend to sell it. There's a lot of risk with that. But it's not going to be highly acrobatic. It's just going to be a reasonable flyer in order for you to get a hang on flying, and whether it's in angle mode or acro mode. This is acro, so the quad is not doing any self-leveling. I'm in control of all the axes, and I have to make sure that I don't crash or bonk into something. You learn throttle control, you learn to mix yaw and roll for coordinated turns, and then you can start to work into other things as you get more and more comfortable, whether they're dives or punch outs, or you're going to do a quick snap roll or flip. Anything like that that you want to learn to do, you can learn it with this. It's just going to be more muted than, say, something that's lighter running the same sort of configuration. We get a lot of efficiency out of the fact that these are really low kV motors. I would also advise that if you're starting out, that you'll probably want to do this not around a bunch of trees and other obstacles, that you probably want to find yourself a big open field. Maybe you live near a soccer field or football field or some sort of athletic field, or just out in the country somewhere, and keep it reasonably close to you so it doesn't get away from you, and just learn to fly in an area that won't cause so much damage if you get out of hand. And if you do get out of hand, keep it low, hit that disarm switch, don't burn up your motors trying to regain control and get tangled up into a tree. This does come with a number of different receiver options I see listed here on the Hobbywing website: FrSky XM, FlySky RX, DSMX, and it also comes with the radio link. I used to years ago have a radio link radio. I don't know how those have progressed. You can also get it without a receiver and put your own receiver, say if you wanted to do something more long range. If you're not familiar with the Caddx Turtle, the FPV view, what you see in the goggles is what you see in front of you. You see where you also get recording indicators in the top part of the screen, and you do see where that I have my OSD laid in my typical places, and where those recording indicators sit does cover up a little bit of my OSD. So if you were flying one of these and sensitive to that positioning, you probably need to move some of your OSD elements through beta flight. I didn't mention it in the quick roll, but I will show you right here. Hopefully you can see, maybe if I rotate it around right down in there, that is an MMCX connector for your VTX. I think most people would go with an MMCX, which this one has, so no worries there. We've also got a bunch of tape around all those little wires that connect the Caddx Turtle camera to the board. You've got the USB plug right there, and then you've also got the SD card slot that goes in right there. I would suggest you put a little piece of tape over this area after you put your card in, or you can put some tape on the back side of the card, not the underside where the copper fingers are, on the other side, and then tape it to the top. I suppose you could top mount your battery. It does have slots for it, and you could fly it, instead of being down here, you could fly it up here, but I believe they intended for you to have the battery underneath, because when you get it out of the box, you'll find that the battery strap is on the bottom. Also good for people who are learning is the buzzer, so you can put the buzzer on a switch, so if you go down and you've kind of lost track of where you're at, you can hit that switch, the buzzer starts emitting, you can go locate your quad. Don't expect these hoops to survive the most dramatic of crashes. That crash I showed you, these were not on. So the carbon, which is pretty flexible, may or may not be extra durable. It's really hard to say on that stuff. We've discussed in other videos where we talked about flexicarbon on how it gives instead of snaps, and maybe that's the case. I can't say. I don't study carbon. I've seen really hard and stiff carbon snap, and I've seen really flexible carbon not snap. So it kind of goes both ways. It really depends on where you want things to be. But I think for someone who's just starting out, if you're avoiding objects, that the flexible carbon won't be a problem. You may find if you try to tune this, if you get this into an experienced pilot's hands and they tune it to that nth degree, that having flexible arms could create a problem with getting that tuned just to that edge of perfect. The prop choice, as you heard in the flight video, that creates a pretty quiet flight. So you shouldn't have too many people noticing you if you happen to be flying in an area. Of course, if it's a heavily populated area, then you're probably still going to be noticed because it does create an odd noise. We've got 3D printed pieces holding our antennas in place. While this doesn't give us ideal range, it is way better than a lot of other mounting systems I've seen. Sometimes you see them where there's no mounting system involved. So I believe mine came without a receiver, so you will still get this stuff even if you don't buy it with a receiver. So you don't have to worry or think about that. And then of course this just kind of holds it in place. This would be fine. The VTX antenna would be fine even without this 3D printed piece, because you can see that it's up through this hole. It's a pretty stiff coax that's on this VTX, so I don't think that would flop over and get into the props and get damaged. Looks like they used some more of that Emax tape to secure the motor wires down. I always appreciate that. Seems like they have a little bit of a different size. Normally I see it real long. The stuff I have is real narrow, but the stuff I got from Frank Barajas, I believe he cut that down before he sent that to me. As I mentioned in the quick roll, this zip tie I added, and that is for strain relief. So if you have a battery ejection, when it pulls on this, when the battery becomes dislodged, it doesn't pull on the solder pads that are way down here on your ESC. You pull too hard on those solder pads, it pulls the solder pads right off. You can sometimes, if you can find the trace, you can repair that. But again, this product being geared towards people who are just starting, that's probably not what you're looking for. So when you get yours, if you get one, put this zip tie down here and hunker it down a little bit. Another minor detail, we have hex-headed screws all the way around. I don't see where we've included any Phillips screws, so that's kind of nice because I like that, because when we have micro screws and we have fillet head, I tend to mess those up. So that's something I like to point out if you suffer from the same problem. The last piece is the price point. This, of course, has got an HD camera in it. Those are coming in around $50, $55 now. So that's something that would boost the price a little bit over something that didn't have this camera. And I'm currently seeing the $9.99. So that's something you have to weigh on where it fits in your budget. I'll have a link down below in case you want to look at more detailed specs that are listed on the website, or if you want to place an order, you can do that through there. I don't believe this is available. This specific combination, we have seen a number of these similarly, but this specific combination I believe is only available on the Hobbywing website. And that's hobby-wing.com, but of course, as I said previously, there is a link down in the description. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching.